Okay, so welcome again. The week has gone by. I hope it's been a joyful one for all of us. And we've got a couple of different things to talk about. Well, they're different and the same, really. We're going to be mentioning infinite intelligence again. We're going to be mentioning artificial intelligence, perhaps for the first time. And we're going to ask ourselves the question, do we have any free will? And do we have any free will? And I guess most of us would think, well, yes, nobody forces me to do things. I make my own decisions in life and I stand or fall on them. Well, by the time we finish this program, you may still think the same thing, but probably not as strongly as you might do just now. Or, of course, you might think at the moment you have no feel of anyway. You just follow the tides and the seasons and see what turns up. Now, when we study the work of the major scientists through the ages, many of them, and maybe even most of them for all I know, they all have got a very big question in their mind. The more they study, the more they get into their subject, the more they come up with these wonderful mathematical equations, the understanding of science and the biology and the chemistry and everything that makes the universe what it is. They're always left with this nagging doubt that they're missing something pretty obvious, because they say things like, there's no question that the more we study, the more I study, we see that there's an order in life. We see that there's a structure to it that's, I think as Edison said, is mathematical in its precision. And it leads them inescapably to the concept that there's an intelligence out there. There's an intelligence that may be on a different dimension or something, that things just haven't happened with a big bang and everything took and life started, millions and billions of years after that. And when you start believing that indeed there is a higher order of life, and Carl Jung, of course, who we've mentioned many times, he certainly fell into that category, although you wouldn't perhaps call him a pure scientist, but he was certainly, well, he was many things, and the scientist was perhaps one of them, certainly one of the founders of modern psychology. And Einstein's a person whose name keeps cropping up all the time when you do any kind of Googling on these kind of subjects. And he said he was a member of he had a strong foundation in the Jewish faith, but as his views took a life of their own, he became increasingly convinced that we are living in we are predetermined, that he said everything in the universe, he says, including us, our actions are predetermined, and if we have the right tools, can be predicted. And of course, this doesn't go down well with many religions, and another word for it, I think, in the past has been called predestination, that we're brought onto this planet and the blueprint for our life has already been written, which obviously sounds incredibly difficult, if not impossible to believe. But he did believe it. And as a result, he was excommunicated from his Jewish faith and very much regretted that, I guess, until his final days, although as far as I am aware, he never changed his views. And he was asked so many times, did he have a religion? And he said, yes, I have a religion. And then when he was pressed on the subject, he would say something like, well, my view of religion is based on Baruch Spinoza. It's Spinoza's view of God. Spinoza's a little-known philosopher, but known as a prince of philosopher, who basically says that, yes, there is God, and you find God anywhere. Anywhere you look in nature, anywhere where you see life, you see God. So this capacity of having no free will, how does that fit with some of the things that we've talked before? Well, perhaps let's think about something. This is a subject I mentioned. I was talking about artificial intelligence, and that's a subject that I occasionally get asked to talk about, but actually increasingly, because I think more and more people are waking up to the fact that there is an artificial intelligence, that mankind all people of this world, all the brilliant people in this world can write these algorithms that become increasingly complicated, and they get so complicated and so the databases are so vast that we've probably already reached the point where no single human being can possibly understand what is being programmed into these algorithms, and even the limitless nature of what these algorithms come up with. We see this. We see this on the social media. We see these algorithms being used to influence people in elections. We see them influencing our buying habits. In fact, they touch every single part of our life, and many people are unaware of that. But many more people, I think, are beginning to realize just how these tentacles surround and wrap around us. And you'll probably all have instances like this where you're looking on your Facebook or your Twitter or something, and you're just thinking about, you know, your next trip to the shops or the next bit of online shopping you're going to do, and just as the thought passes through your mind, there's an advertisement that appears on the top right-hand corner, telling you often exactly what it is that you're looking for. Now, how does that happen? Well, it can only happen by artificial intelligence and these sophisticated algorithms. And of course, that's why these companies that control these algorithms are the richest companies in the world. Because when you can predict how people are going to behave, then that is power that many, many people and corporations will pay big money for. And that's the world we're living in at the moment, for good or for worse. There is good, obviously there's good things, good, as with all these things, it's yin and yang. We get lots of great stuff from artificial intelligence, and the other side of it is what I've just been talking about. So how can we sort of put our hands around this and try and simplify this, and perhaps go back to some of the more basic things that we've talked about in this series of webinars? And you'll know by now, you know, my view of our reptile brain, my view as founded in as a biologist, as a medical doctor, is that, you know, I believe in evolution. That was the bread and butter that I was brought up with. But I've never excluded the possibility of God or gods or some sort of higher spiritual force. But in evolutionary terms, we've got probably the most powerful brain. There was a bit of a hesitation there because there are other mammals that might just possibly have higher intelligence. Not that we know what intelligence is or isn't, but I'm thinking particularly of dolphins and even whales for that. Okay, they don't speak the way we do, they don't do the things that we do, but their brains could be working on a very different level. I don't know. But all I do know is that this concept of the reptile brain explains a lot to me. In evolutionary terms, we've all been through the tree of life and all those kind of things, and our brain is like an onion. It's got onion skins, and the onion skins on the outside of our brain are the newest things that we evolved into, we created into. We go into the midbrain, and we're going back, you know, a few more million years in evolution, and we get down to the small bit of the brain, that is the reptile brain, and that goes back many millions of years. And the reptile brain concerns itself only with things that are line of sight. There's no ambiguity in the reptile brain. If you're threatened, it's the reptile brain that will tell you exactly how you have to respond, to run away, to fight the challenge, or sometimes to freeze. And we have thoughts arising from our reptile brain all the time. And a lot of these thoughts are really not very admirable, because protection of self, acquisition of things from other people, particularly if they're brighter and shinier than what we have, things that will provide us with shelter and security and comfort, things that we can steal from other tribes. All of these things are instincts that are hardwired into us. Now, we wouldn't have got where we are today if we had lived by our reptile brain, because the higher functions of our consciousness, they are there to filter some of these thoughts and to sanitize them, and sometimes to force those thoughts back down into the swamp, other times to let the thoughts come through, but we modify them. We put some coloring. We make them more socially acceptable. We've learnt the words that will do that, that will allow us to get away with really what we see in ourselves as reptile behavior. Well, that's the problem, actually, because many times we don't see it in ourselves. But if we study this thing and make a point of spending some time watching others, most behaviors that we see can be explained in those terms, and particularly so when you start putting people under stress. When people have got all the food they want, the shelter they want, the money they have, the relationships they have, life's a pretty easy place to be. But put people under stress where those things are threatened, and there is literally, as we've seen in history and in modern history for that point, there is no limit to what apparently normal people will do. So if we're behaving like robots, like reptile robots, or we're predestined, as Einstein said, that's a pretty nihilistic message. It's a pretty hopeless message, if that really is all there is to it. And I hope that I'm not fooling myself, but I believe there is more to it. And I mentioned that if we think of things, if we recognize what's coming from our reptile brain, we probably don't need to do anything more than that. We can catch ourselves. And when we catch ourselves, we say, that's not going to help. When there's another person that we don't like and we can't put our finger on why, then a little bit of introspection should give us a clue. And it'll often be because that person we see as a threat, or very commonly, it might be that that's a person that we would be a bit more we would like to be a bit more like that person, or we might want to have what that person's got and we haven't got. So that allows us to have kind of some control over this free will concept, and free will can be divided, I guess, into the people that believe we have total free will, and they kind of often get disaffected and disappointed and disheartened by life, because it doesn't matter how many mantras they say to themselves and how free they allow their thoughts to roam and how strong their law of intention is, they don't get what they want from life, whatever that might be. And then there's the one that think they have no free will, then they just accept it as such. They accept that that's the way life's going to be, and they'll take it on the chin. Whatever bad cards or good cards are going to be dealt to them. But sooner or later, they're going to get depressed. So whichever way you look at the scale, if you're on one extreme or the other, you're not going to be living an easy street and you're not going to be having a joyful life. So the sweet spot is somewhere in the middle. Now, I'm going back to science now, and I'm pulling myself up by my bootlaces from the swamp, quite literally, because here I have a shoelace. And the reason I have it here is to point out the little elastic thing at the end. Because if I pulled this off, or as usually happens in the washing machine, particularly with a string that goes around your swimming trunks, this bit will pull off and the whole shoelace or tie lace, the tie string, will unwrap itself. And if it doesn't come completely undone, it'll certainly look a bit like a dog's breakfast. Now, what does this have to do with us, with evolution and things? Well, it has to do with the genes that we have and the chromosomes that we're made of. Because our brain, one way or the other, every way, is going to be controlled by our genes, because our genes and our chromosomes are the things that drive the engine of every single cell in our body. And we have something like this. If you imagine that this is one chromosome, well, and chromosomes are always paired, well, apart from the XY chromosome, that's the one exception. And it has this thing at the end that's called a telomere. And a telomere does exactly the same thing as it does to my shoelace. It stops things unraveling, because when our chromosomes start to unravel, they start to make associations, or they join up with bits that they shouldn't be joined up with, and things happen. These are called genetic malformations. And sometimes these genetic malformations can be good. They can be coincidental and good, but very often they're not good. And the other interesting thing about the shoelace thing is that scientists are very interested in measuring the length of that bit of plastic, because through their experiments, they've found out that people with long telomeres live longer and are healthier than people with shorter ones. So this gets a bit scary, because it's now relatively easy for you to find out how long your telomeres are. You would have to give usually a blood sample, it could even be saliva, and you'll get the result back if you really want to know. But the most important part of this discussion so far is that we've found something that we can put some leverage on. We can do things to make our telomeres longer, and they are the same things that we've mentioned on these shows time and time again. People who meditate for some reason have longer telomeres. People who take regular exercise for some reason have longer telomeres. People who have a diet which is rich in the things that our diet should be rich in have longer telomeres. So we all wonder why when scientists study mortality, how long people live in different parts of the world, why so often the Mediterranean lifestyle comes pretty high on the list, because they do all of those things one way or another. And that's what our government is recommending that we do now, to take the Mediterranean diet. Well, that advice has been around for years, but we are beginning to put a bit more science to it. And things that are good for the mind, are good for the body, are good for the mind. And mind, body, and soul are those three things that go together. And if you can get some kind of balance in your life of those three things, it's definitely going to be very helpful to you in whatever you want to do. So there we are. That's an exploration of quite a few diverse topics, with an underlying message that we might not have much free will, but we have some, and we have some control over what our outcome in life is going to be. So that's a good time for me to take a very, very deep breath, knowing that there's going to be a forest of hands coming up to ask a question immediately, or if not, I can always rely on, you guessed, Greg.
Okay, then. So it was a great intro, Steve, packed with loads of information, and I was noting my questions, and I don't really know which one to choose. Just a comment. I don't think the future is predestined, and I do believe we have a free will. I think the future is just a probability. And we can change those probabilities through working on ourselves and living life focusing on positive emotions, for instance. So that's just one comment. The other question, yesterday I met my friends and that I haven't seen for like 7 years, and we had an amazing meeting and a dinner, and talking about energy and spirituality and Carl Jung. And my question is connected to Carl Jung. Are we coming to this world with a certain set of personality features, or do we just acquire them along the way through the experiences of life? Steve?
Well, I don't think any of us know the answer to that question, but I believe that when a person is born, they are pretty much perfect as far as their personality is concerned. They may not be perfect as far as their genes are concerned. They might be born blind, for example, or they might have other genetic malformations. But personality-wise, I would say that's about as pure as a person could be. And those of us who've watched babies turn into young children, all the rest of it, we see that they start layering their personality with other stuff. Now, how good is this other stuff? We don't really know, but we know that other people have a huge influence over a developing mind. And that's why it's so important for young children, really, to be hopefully exposed to that best kind of mind, or the most inquiring curiosity, and be given those opportunities to explore. So Einstein, when he was asked about these things, how can you possibly say that somebody like a murderer is a good person? Are you saying that you regard him in the same view as you would anybody else? And he said, well, I'm saying much that. He said, except I wouldn't invite him to dinner, or her to dinner. But he understood, apparently, what it is that drove a person to things like that. And our prison populations in most countries of the world have never been higher, full of people who've done stuff. And for all I know, done stuff that they wish they hadn't done. I don't know. I've never really been in a prison before. I've certainly worked with prisoners, ex-prisoners, and people who did go to prison. So that's when personalities get very blurred. You have to dig very deep in those case circumstances to find out the diamond that's inside, the diamond that was born inside that baby. Because it's not just other people that will influence this human being, but also the circumstances that life throws upon it. And Carl Jung, one of the big things he talked about was what he called the process of individuation. And he thought that all of us were on a journey from day one, and that our goal was to learn and enrich our personality and to find wisdom and even spirituality, and at the end of our journey to meet God. Those weren't his exact words, but that's a very approximate paraphrase. So it's a complicated one, Greg, personality. And are there things we can do? Well, we've talked before, the things we can do. I think introspection, constructive introspection is always going to be valuable, because it allows us a little bit of insight into why some days we're pretty bad, some months we're pretty bad, why we're on tilt sometimes, and allows us, I think, to at least control the excesses of our reptile brain. What do other people think? Now, of course, you can raise any subject on this show. It doesn't have to be the stuff we've been talking about. But anyway, let's hear some from some other people.
Yeah, Caroline.
Yeah, when you said introspection, actually, that would be positive. Apart from, usually people, when they're thinking about their bad points, think of a long list of bad things. It's difficult to think of good stuff, and then you can get down a bit of a tricky old rabbit hole there. Beating yourself up the whole time isn't very positive. How do you do positive introspection? That's probably what I mean.
Well, the more you look inside yourself, the more gloomy it can be, because you're quite right. I don't know why this is so, but our default state is that when we look into the past, the things that shine out the brightest to us are not our most bright, illuminating moments. They're the things that we did that we're not proud of and wish we hadn't done. But apparently we can't turn the clock back. So I guess it all depends on how you're going to think about those things. If you think about those things, well, that was in the past. I'm not that same person that was in the past. I can now look back and I can see a little bit about why I did what I did. And I'm regretful for that. And if it's possible to make that good, I'll do it. Often, of course, it isn't possible. But there's a learning. and knowing that you're in the clutches of reptile brain. Now, that won't get you off the hook when you're in a court of law, but biologically, I think it's a plausible explanation why people do crazy things. In fact, I can't think of any other reason why people do crazy things, other than if they're schizophrenic, of course. And in this country, at least, even schizophrenics face the court of the law, where really, they have a medical illness. Doesn't mean to say that society should not be protected from them or the individual, but I don't see much sense in throwing people like that into jail. I don't think that helps anybody.
So,
yeah, I was wondering how you integrated ego with that, the reptilian brain, ego, and maybe predestination.
That's a good one. Predestination and reptile brain. I think that reptile brain is going to drive us in a certain direction. It might not drive us in exactly the direction that our genes and chromosomes might have dictated to us, but that's a partial fit with predestination. Now, where does ego fit? I don't believe that ego can come from the unconscious, because from reptile brain, from the unconscious, because the reptile brain is not judgmental. It's not weighing up things like, is this the right thing to do? Is this the wrong thing to do? So ego has to be a higher center. And I would think that it's pretty high, right in the top of our consciousness. And ego regards itself as the most intelligent part of the brain. And it believes that it has this controlling, processing role, which, of course, could be good. That could save us from some of the worst things arriving from the swamp. But unfortunately, ego takes it too far in many, many cases. And rather than being a positive force, like, not a good idea to go there, Steve, you've done that one before. How about doing this instead? Being just a bit more intelligent for once in your life. That can be helpful. But often it's very critical, and it wants you never, ever to go into uncharted water, because ego doesn't like that. Ego will always be worried about the downside and of all the things that can go wrong. So ego has its role. It's obviously there for a purpose, but not too big a role, perhaps.
I've got one more in that case.
Okay.
If you're ready for this. I think this is another question with no answer, really. And when I was thinking today what you're going to be talking about, I was pretty sure, or maybe I just wanted you to be talking about that infinite intelligence, which I call universe. And the question is, how does it work? And what I mean is, the moment we align ourselves with our true purpose, it seems like it just doesn't stop giving. And I am experiencing this now. The moment, as you, Steve, know, last September, maybe October, I decided to change my life completely, to turn it around. Not thinking about the future at all. Because that's what I believed. This is what everything I was learning was telling me, that this is how it should be done. Just trust the universe, because it will start giving. And a few months forward, I'm having like 3 dream jobs mixed into one. And the beauty of it is that I don't work for it. I just am, and observing and watching, and everything just comes to me, which is truly magical. So and I think, kind of answering the question myself, the moment you align yourself with that true purpose, the thing you do, the thing that you should be doing, I think just nothing can stop you succeeding in whatever that is. The question is, knowing that probably there is no answer, maybe there is, how does it work? How the universe works? How does it know what to give me?
Well, I see that Sue's got her hand up. I'm just going to answer your question a little bit, and then we'll see what Sue's got to say. The way you actually were describing that, it gave me the thought, well, see, I just wonder, and I never had this thought before, could you actually be talking about predestination? Because there's no question that in Zen philosophy, they talk about the concept of effortless effort. And people talk about the flow experience or being in the zone. I mean, all elite performers know about these things. They might call it a different thing, but things do go very well when we get out of our own way. There's no doubt about that. And so perhaps that's what you're doing. You're acknowledging your predestination, what your life is supposed to be. I mean, maybe we all have a compass inside us that will tell us when we're a little bit off track. And maybe it's a moral compass as well. Well, mind, body, and soul compass for all of those things. But when people usually know when maybe always know when they're doing the right thing, when they know that something's meant to be. And if you've got, busy over-controlling ego, or, some pretty dire stuff coming up from the reptile brain, jealousy, fear, aggression, all those kind of things, I would say that all of these things are going to take you off that path that you found for yourself. And again, Carl Jung might say, well, what you're talking about is the individuation that he talked about. I think many of us believe we're on some kind of a path. Might be pretty indistinct, but I mean, we're on this planet for a reason. We all believe that we're on this planet for a reason. We all have things we want to do, things we don't want to do. Okay, I cut the flow off with you there, Sue, so please share with us.
No, I was just thinking about what Greg said, and he said when you find your purpose, things are effortless. I think the trouble is actually finding your purpose and how to get out of your way, and things at times are effortless, but what your life's purpose is can seem quite intangible at times.
It can, yeah.
Yeah, yes.
It can indeed. And this might be a counterintuitive Zen statement to add to all the others, but maybe if you're looking for purpose, it will be very difficult and confusing. Maybe you have to allow purpose to look for you. And how would that work? It means putting yourself, doing the kinds of stuff that you like doing and you get some gratification and satisfaction from. And often there's not a line of sight from what you like doing to, well, where's that going to lead you? I mean, when you start looking for that, chances are you won't be able to answer that question. We live in a materialistic society, so people usually would regard their journey as the accumulation of wealth and, living an increasingly comfortable life and all the things that go with it. And that's what that's what we're encouraged. That's the journey that we're encouraged to do. That society would appreciate and respect us for. To take Greg's approach or to an artist's approach and just wait and see, just do bits and pieces that you like doing every day and see what happens. They would say, oh no, that won't work. Only wimps eat breakfast or lunch. Only wimps need to have sleep, even if they're doing 3 things that they like doing. And for better or for worse, that's my approach to life. I've stopped doing stuff by and large that I don't like doing, and I'm more than happy to do stuff that I do like, even if I don't know which direction it's going to take me to. It's a bit like these shows. I don't really have any idea where it's going to take us, and sometimes it doesn't seem as if it's taken us anywhere. And sometimes, even though I'm presenting them, I learn a lot from them. I don't see my job as imparting knowledge to others. If I can be some kind of catalyst, that's fine. But the people who are on this show, they know more about some of these things than I do, and that's what I like to hear.
Yeah, I was just going to agree with Sue. I think looking for purpose is something you think, oh, that's a real challenge. And I don't know, everybody seems to have one. I think, but actually, you're right. do what you enjoy doing? And how would you advise people who have actually found their purpose and they are natural musicians, they're actors, they have their role in life, they were in their flow state, and now because of this situation where the whole world is in, this purpose has been snatched from them, they are not able to work. How do people cope with that?
Well, that's a good observation. I don't think people cope very well with it, because being in flow is addictive. I mean, you're releasing these endorphins in your mind, and you find people who found flow through creativity, through performing. They never ever want to retire. I mean, I don't think the Rolling Stones are ever going to retire, and they're just one of many examples. The people that were stars when we were young are still stars now, and they're earning more money and playing to more people than they ever did before. So when you cut off, I mean, live events is the energy of life. A live event is the energy of life. There's a special feeling. That's why, going to a live performance is always going to be better than one that's pre-recorded, because you allow the magic room to get in. There's always a crack where the light shines in. That's the magic of being in the moment. So people like that, and we're living in very unnatural times, very, very unnatural times. This is the opposite, I think, of what nature would have intended. We're turning away from society. We're turning away from being social animals. And I think we're seeing some of these behaviors in people. They're behaving in ways that they wouldn't ordinarily behave. And they don't see that themselves, because we're always the last person to see our own behavior. But I don't know how we're going to come out of this. I see lots of positive things. I mean, people have found new things to do. They've found new hobbies to do, and surprisingly enough, guess what? They're enjoying it. You can't get flour in the supermarkets because everybody's baking their own bread and loving it, loving the baking and loving the eating of it and loving preparing something for other people. So people are ingenious. They will find solutions, many of them. But there's also many who are in a pretty dark place at the moment. And I think we all need to start thinking about that, because sooner or later we'll come out the other side. But, what's going to be out there when we get there? It's going to be a lot of repair work to be done. I can see Johnny's hand up there in the corner of my screen. Johnny?
Yeah.
Always the first person to register for these shows.
Thank you. I was going to say that in these difficult times, and you've spoken about fight or flight, isn't this a good time for us to reflect on how we've responded to this? Because sometimes our ego when times are good, we can say, oh yeah, we'd be serving others, we'd like to do more, and yet the universe has conspired to give us a situation that one has shown us a lot about ourselves. How did I act in the supermarket? Was I the guy that bought 20 bottles of water when I only needed one? Have I gone the extra mile to serve and help others? So we could look at this as a good way of seeing how we actually really do act when we're in challenging times, and how did I respond to the situation. And the second point I wanted to make was, it's a great lesson for gratitude, because the things that we took for granted, going out for dinner with your family, going to the shopping centre, having a coffee with your mum, whoever it may be, they were just things that we took for granted, did them. But now we come out through the other side and we are doing a few more normal things. We can see, do we really actually have gratitude? So I think that this is a good test for ourselves to really see, saying one thing and then acting, are my actions and thoughts congruent?
Yeah, I think if this is a great social and psychological experiment that has happened. I mean, I'm not suggesting anybody's designed it to be so, but it is, and it is perhaps it's a way. I haven't got a clue, but maybe it is a wake up call for all of us. For planet Earth. I mean, we know that planet Earth is struggling with all of the pollution and everything that's going on. And guess what? Shove everybody in lockdown for a few months, and what happens to the planet Earth? Starts flourishing again. some of the, the things start returning to more normal biological levels. But as you say, what's going to happen on the other side when we come out? I don't know. I think we have all been given an opportunity to be more insightful. And I bet, even if it's unconsciously, I bet we all are more insightful. Because we've been deprived of the normal activities that we do, the normal sensory inputs. Our days have got much more narrowed in what we do, our activities. We've had more time to think, more time to do different things. And I just, I have a feeling that when we come out the other side, I don't think we will go back to some of the stuff that we did before. I think those have, maybe not gone forever, but I think they're going to be a smaller part of our life.
Just to say, and also just say thank you to you, because like in this uncertain time where you've given us an element of certainty on a Thursday at 6 o'clock, like you didn't have to do something like this for us. And then, you've gone the extra mile to serve others and give us some hope and inspiration in tough times. It also says a lot about your character.
Well, I mean,
thank
thank you for that, Johnny. But it may not be quite like that. I mean, I like everybody. I was found. My life was turned upside down, and where I've always had busy days. I mean, I work 7 days a week. I mean, I'm not saying I work 12 hours every day, but there isn't a day that goes by without some stuff to do with my work that I have to take care of. And this was one thing that I could do. I've always felt that I should have been doing webinars. I've always been put off by the technology and various other reasons. I've found good excuses not to. Well, this is something, I don't know how it will be judged now or in the future, but this is what has been my lockdown experience, and I'd have been lost without something to plan and think about all week. And it was the same with my podcast channel. I've always known I should start doing podcasts, so I've got into it. And I've done various other things that I wouldn't do. So we're all different, and but I think we all I think that I really feel sorry for the people who don't have the opportunity of doing anything. I mean, people who are really stuck in awful accommodation, probably with awful people for all we know, and not the opportunities we have. I mean, things are pretty bad enough in this country, but when you look at what's going on in countries like India and Brazil and plenty of other places, very, very, very challenging times for those people. Okay, well, it's about time to end. I would love to end on a high note. So if anybody's got a high note, then that's great. But Caroline's got one. Okay, good.
Actually, I was just going to agree with Johnny. I just have got into the routine of 6 o'clock in the evening once a week now, and I like seeing his cheery face and everybody else's cheery face. It's a good part of the week, and I enjoy seeing the little crowd that gathers together, and it's as social as we get lots of times. So yeah, thanks everybody. It's nice to see you.
Okay, well, thank you. That was exactly the positive ending that I wanted, and I agree with it. I mean, we've got we have new people every week, but we also have many of the same faces we're getting to know, and it's great. It makes my week. I look forward to it as well. If I didn't like doing this, I can assure you I wouldn't be doing it. So we will meet again next week. That is our predestined path, I hope. If another path comes up, well, then we'll have to follow the other one. But whatever happens, stay positive, explore opportunities, look inside yourself a little bit, and tell your ego to shut up a little bit as well. Okay, till then, goodbye.